And we're recording.
All right.
Oh,
Hello, everyone.
hi, hello.
Hey,
Oh, wave,
hello.
yay. Cool. All right. So we're going to start off today with some demos of some of the really cool work that has been done. And demos are kind of um, a normal part of being on a development team. And a lot of times you'll do demos for product managers or designers or other engineers, managers, just to show it off. And usually a good agile practice is to do a lot of demos and get a lot of feedback so that you learn early on from everybody. The earlier the better, really, about when things are going off the rails, right? Um, or when they're doing really well and So I'd say with the demos, let's not only show it off, but also the team. We can comment on what we like, what we don't like, things like that. Who would like to go first? Which team? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we had the first issue, so I just figured.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to share your screen and walk us through it?
Yes, I will share the screen. Give me a sec. Everyone see the app?
Yes.
Okay.
There it is. Good.
So we were responsible for issue number 1. Our user story was, as a component, I want to be able to read from and write to the Firebase Firestore database so that users can persist information. The acceptance criteria to fulfill this user story was to add the dependencies of Firebase, React Firebase hooks, to make a change in the Firestore database and have it show up in the app, and then make a change in the app and have it show up in the Firestore database. So now I'll walk you through a really quick live demo of the app. So here on our welcome page, under test, we click the click me button. We show the hello world in our unordered list. And then to show you that that is happening in the Firestore database, you can see, well, you didn't see it first, but it did add a second hello world here in the test message. And then so to see the change happening back in the app, we'll go ahead and in our test collection, add a document. I'll go ahead and just do an auto ID generation. The field name for this, we set to test message. And for the value, I'll just say hello from Firestore. Save that. We see that there we are. Our collection was added. And then back in the React app, we see hello from Firestore. Nice. And with that, I will hand it over to Brittany to walk us through the code.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? Hello?
Yep,
yeah.
got
yeah,
you. Sorry.
We're all giving thumbs up over here.
All I see is code. Okay, thank you for confirming. So let's start by looking at the Firebase file there. You can see on line 17, we're creating a reference to our database in the Firestore. And then we export it on line 19. And then let's go ahead and jump over to the test component. So this is where we're importing our reference to the database, and that allows us to communicate with the Firestore from this file. And then we have a button down on line 18, and that has an on-click event listener and a handle click helper function. So when we click the button, this helper function is going to run, and it's going to add our test message, hello world, to the collection called tests. Now, the nice thing about Firebase is if test doesn't exist when this runs, it's going to create it for us. And then we have to access our data, and we'll stay here for just a second. Initially, we had the call to the Firestore for data here in the test component, but we wanted to make the code more reusable, so we abstracted it out and put it in a custom function or a custom hook. We are calling that hook, actually just, sorry, 1 second in test. Yeah, we're calling that hook on line 6, use Firestore, and you pass in the name of the collection that you want to access. Cool, thanks Rachel, if you could jump over now. Thank you, awesome. So use effect here is inside of our custom use Firestore hook, and it is getting a snapshot of the documents from our test collection, and it's looping through that and creating an array of objects and pushing each one of those objects to the documents, and those objects have the data from our documents from the Firestore collection. So it returns that array to our test component. We'll go back there. And then in the return statement, we are looping over that array and rendering out our message. And I think that is everything. Okay.
Cool. Nice.
Any
Great
questions
demo.
or thank you. Any questions, anything anyone would like to know about the code?
I mean, I like the, I think I expressed it in the PR. I really like that the hook and the, I think that'll be probably come in really handy as you go forward. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really loved how you're super flexible and agile about it. Like you had it one way and you saw, okay, we want to find a way to make it even better. And so you took that initiative to do that. I thought that was really awesome. Going forward, so we installed React Firebase hooks, which we didn't use this time around. It wasn't super necessary, but just know for any of the issues that are using Firestore, there's some really neat methods and some really neat hooks in React Firestore hooks. Is that what it's called? React Firebase hooks. There's some neat hooks in there, like use collection and use a bunch of things. So those would be interesting things to explore moving forward.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, anything?
It was a really good demo. I love how
Yeah.
you were super prepared and you knew who was going to do what, and just really smooth. Very good job.
Thank
So
you.
no pressure next group.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Okay. Does the next group want to jump in, give it a shot?
Yeah.
Or show us what you did?
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll start off. Give me 1 second to share my screen. I have a million tabs open. Sorry.
That's how you know you're a developer, is when you have a lot of tabs open.
Okay.
I think I usually average around 15, maybe.
Oh, I have way more than that.
Cool. I'm seeing it.
Oh wait, which screen are you seeing? It's not really showing me.
The GitHub.
Okay,
issue.
that's so weird. It's not like telling me which screen is being displayed right now, but okay, that's what I want you to see.
Okay, cool.
So we had issue 2, and our issue was as a user, I want to be able to navigate between the list view and the add item view so that the interface is clearly delineated between viewing and adding. Our acceptance criteria for this issue was we had to install React Router DOM as a dependency. The links for the add and list view are at the bottom of the screen and they're persistent. And then when one of the links is clicked, the browser URL updates to represent the current view and the matching component. And also, whenever one of the links is clicked, it should display bold. So this is what we have for what we worked on. So we have this little H1 to show what view you're looking at, and also it displays in the URL, like in the path. And as you see, when you click the other link, it changes both the H1 and the path. And we use that with React Router DOM with the routes components. And I can show you the code that we set up to use it. Just let me switch screens again because this is on my other monitor. All right, can you see that?
We can.
Yep, we see your code.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is the app component, and in here we've imported route and switch to help us with setting the path whenever a link is clicked. Initially, we had it to where the route was just like exact path without switch, but yet kind of taught me that we could just use switch and have our route set up like kind of like in like a descending order, where this path, because it's like the home path, it's the base path, it's the most basic path. With switch, it matches the path exactly. But if this router or if this route was up here, it would all get just like default go to this path because all of these paths have this little slash. So we use switch instead of using the exact path. And then let me move this out of the way. So in our navigation, I also grabbed nav link from React Router DOM. This is so that we could have the links at the bottom and they would route to the path once clicked. And these are the components that we use. They're just basic display functional components right now. Initially, to get the link to display bold on click, I used use state and like a toggle state, but that wasn't like the best option. And Lauren kind of updated us in like an easier way to use to get the list to display bold without having to use state. And that's where Viet came in, and he really like improved the functionality with the active class name. So I'm just going to let him go into more detail about that and styling.
Well, thanks. I'm gonna take over the screen here. If you, cool, thank you. Can you all see that or?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. You see the split screen, right? I just want to make. Okay, great. You out of the way. And you out of the way. Okay, so let's see. With the active class name property, it allowed us to use the styling. I guess the way I understand it, it's just like using class name in a sense with the link link component. So what happens is that the active element gets the style that we have here, which is it changes the background color to light gray and makes the text bold. So that's really basic feature that helped us, as Dee said, cut down on a lot of code. And it went from, I don't know, 10 lines to 2 or something like that. So it's a little bit easier readability and just less to look at in general. So originally we had this entire the entire container styled as a column reverse, and I think Laura, one of the mentors, I can't remember which one, had mentioned that something that we want to do and what could possibly be a problem that would affect us in the future. Thinking on that, yeah, it gets a little confusing to have something that was top, it was reversed and then we're calling reverse again, essentially on it. What I mean is that, sorry, I think it's in here. Essentially, these components were all flipped around. Navigation was on top, test was in the middle, and the switch was at the bottom, which made us have to do the column reverse. We changed the ordering so that it's slightly less confusing and definitely makes more sense that way. One of the little styling things that we changed also is, as you can see, that as the screen width changes, first off, we changed, it's like a little minor styling element where we changed the spacing between the two links to be space around. And I think before it might have been centered. It just creates some little breathability, some, I guess, margins on either side of the container. And as we decrease the screen width, you can see that, well, at a certain point, the font size increases and the anchor elements themselves take up more space. And I show you that in the CSS here with the media query, is that we're changing the width of the anchor to 50% of the container. The font size increases slightly. Something that we'll have to think about later on is how we want this to look on smaller screens. So as you can see, as we keep decreasing the size, we're going back to that square button look. And at some point, should do this in here. At some point, it's going to, what's going to happen is that the text is going to just like squeeze together too far in, and we don't necessarily want that to happen. So it's a design element that we're going to have to take a look at as a team. So yeah, sorry, here we go. So as we get smaller and smaller, that text is just getting squeezed, and we'll have to, and at this point, it's, I don't know if we're gonna be working that screen size is this narrow, but it's maybe something that we should think about how we want to do this. And I think somebody, maybe it was either Mike or Chris, I think, had mentioned that there may be alternatives to using breakpoints and meter queries. And maybe we can talk about that some more. But I think that's all I had here. Did you all have any questions for me or Dee?
It's again, really great and polished demo there. I really appreciated you guys going through the like things that you learned along the way. And like Dee, you had mentioned in React Router is it's amazing, but also is a big abstraction that can be intimidating. And I think every single developer in the world has run into that issue of like throwing just the slash up top and then being like, why isn't it going in? Why can't I go anywhere? Yeah. So that's like a something that everybody gets. But yeah, I mean, I thought looks really good. And yeah. Other comments from anyone?
Yeah, great job, y'all. I also just want to especially congratulate both teams on kind of going that extra mile to clean up the code, make it more reusable, think about, mobile device styles and all that. That's really great. And, you could have stopped, but then you continue to make those improvements, and that's great. And I love working on a team of people who go that extra mile, to really think about the experience for the other developers on the team. So I'm sure you're all going to make great teammates one day.
Thank you. Thank you all for the just really helpful feedback throughout the week. I think a lot of the improvements that we made came from some of the comments we received. So, and then Viet and Dee, just amazing job. I thought your initial code was really good, and then just the refactoring that you did, it looks really clean and it's easy to read, and then talking about how you're thinking about, or what you're thinking about that we should kind of discuss together down the line, is just really good to hear.
Yeah.
And also, I had no idea about that active class name. That's cool.
That's
Yeah, I
something
had learned
Lauren
about
brought
that
up.
from another Collab Lab participant last time around, that they had recommended using navlink because it just out of the box, it has this active class name that will automatically attach when that link is active, like when the to path matches the URL. So it's pretty slick, pretty handy.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, anything else in demos, or shall we move on?
One question that I had, and if this is a thing, I think it's more on it not being in the AC, the acceptance criteria, than anything that y'all did. But should there be a link to the homepage as well, like to slash?
That's what I was wondering, and it wasn't in there, so I just like, I don't know if that's something we're gonna do later, but I didn't know.
Yeah, I have the same
Right.
question basically. And I realized looking ahead in some of the other tickets, they refer to the homepage. So like, it clearly seems to be that there are 3 views. There's like home, list, and add. And so I just wonder if maybe the users would ever have a reason to want to navigate back to home. We can always add it in later, but yeah, that was just kind of like a question that came up just as part of, watching the demo, which, that's what demos are for, right? So.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if we need to do that, since the route's already, it's just the / route, right? It'll take us right there. And it's one of those things where when you mentioned, I'm like, okay, when have I wanted to navigate back to the homepage? And it's generally like, oh, or how have I done it, right? And it's if we come, or when we come up with a logo or something, that's just generally like, I'm looking for the logo to like smash to go back to the homepage. So that would be a way that we could take us back there.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to comment on. I thought it was really good in terms of what component goes where, and having that navigation be part of the app, I think is a really probably good decision. And then having the other ones live on their own in the routes. Yeah.
Yep, agreed. And now you're super set up for the upcoming stories. You already have the add an item page. You have that component set up already, and you have the list set up already. So
yeah, cool.
Nice. All right, let's talk about code review. I'm curious what people's experience with code review. Oh, I hate this when I do this because then everybody goes over there. Oh, now I can see you. Okay, what have up until now, what have people's experience with code review been like? Or do you have code review experience, and what has it been like, I guess, if anyone wants to?
I can start.
Sure.
So with Epicodus, we would have a code review, but we weren't having an active conversation about it. It would be written review, and we would get feedback on an independent project we had completed on Fridays, and then make updates to that project as needed based on the feedback that we got. So that's really the only kind of review I have experience with.
Okay. Cool. Anyone else?
I'll just go. Yeah, I have a little bit of experience, like in my group projects for my boot camp. We did it, but it was definitely not as interactive. I would say it was just more of like a form factor, like we need to do this, like, so we've learned the process, but I would say it wasn't super helpful in terms of like actually getting useful feedback. It was more like, okay, your code looks good. There was like, only if really there was a merge conflict would there be some more discussion. So I think what we're doing in Collab Lab is awesome because it's like real.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of practice. I think that's one of the really nice things about Collab Lab is that you'll have practice of doing code review as you would on a dev team where you're getting paid to do it, right? So it's really nice. How about anyone else?
Yeah, I haven't done any a code review like this extensive before. It's mostly been like, hey, would you look at this pull request? And generally, when I've worked with a team in the past, we're doing so much group programming together that we've all seen it and we've all kind of checked it, been okaying it as we go. I haven't done it in this fashion before, where we have two separate teams doing their thing and coming back with another set of mentors and discussing like what could be improved and what might need to be changed and stuff. So yeah, but I agree. I was showing some of my friends like the pull request and like, look at this thing. It's like super extensive. It's like really cool that everybody's giving input and it's just like really helpful, like all the input that we got.
Nice. Dee?
Yeah. So in my boot camp, we initially had like, I guess, mini versions of code review. Like when we had team leads, we would do like one-on-ones with them, and they would like review our projects that we turned in like every week. It was very basic though, but when you get to like the last month of the boot camp, you're put into an actual team, and you're making a product for like a real organization. And so we had to do code reviews and a lot of like pull request reviews, because you had to get your pull request approved before it could get merged. So we had I've had some experience, but honestly, this like experience with Collab Labs in just the first week has been way more extensive than anything I've ever done. Like everyone is pretty focused on actually reviewing and not just like approving without commenting or anything like that. So
Sure.
I like that it's more like engaged.
Cool. Yeah, I think that it's really hard to know how to get started with code review. I think like you go and look at someone's pull request. Maybe it's the first time you've ever had to do a code review, and it's like, oh, what do I do? What do I say? I don't know anything about this person's code. I don't know what they were thinking. How do I do this? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what is code review. We'll talk about the code review cycle, what can make for a really great code review. How can I help others review my code? This is one of my favorite topics. How to review someone else's code. And then kind of just the nuts and bolts of exploring a pull request in GitHub and the different things that you can do in GitHub when you're doing a code review. So code review, I like to think of it as not so much, okay, I'm going to give feedback on this person's code, but it's really a conversation and a collaboration with your team. So one team is proposing, or one person is proposing, I would like to add this code into our code base. What do you think about it? And it's a conversation about, okay, is this a good set of changes to add to our code base? How can we together make this better and make it the best decision for right now for our code? It's a great place to share knowledge and to learn from others. And it's like both sides of the street. It's from the people who are submitting the code and also the people who are reviewing it. And that's a place where you're sharing your work, asking questions. It helps all of us improve as developers. And then it helps your team like disseminate knowledge so that everybody knows what's going on in the code base. It's a shared responsibility, right? It's something that we're all going to contribute to so that we make this the best code and the best application that we can together. And again, it's to improve the code base quality and kind of get everybody on the same page. The code review, like the life cycle of code review looks like this. The developer or developers will open up a pull request and then they ask for feedback. They get that feedback, they'll make some changes. And again, this kind of middle loop, it keeps going around. We receive feedback, we make changes, we talk with one another and communicate, like, how can we make this better? Do I like, how do I do this better, etc. And once everyone agrees, like, that this looks good, then we merge that into main. So what can make for a really good code review and a great code review experience? Number one, you want to have things set up in your repository, in your development environment, so that you don't have to worry about stylistic changes. You don't have to worry about tabs versus spaces. You don't have to worry about, do we put parentheses around a single argument, right? That prettier and ESLint and any type checking that we have just decides all of that stuff for us. So when we're doing code review, we don't have to worry about any of those things. All of that gets automated. It's really important to, as the reviewer, to make sure that you try out the feature branch or pull down that code locally on your machine and run the code, just to make sure that, like, it's meeting the acceptance criteria and you're not just taking a quick glance and giving it a thumbs up, right? Looks good to me. You want to make sure that it really does what it says that it's supposed to do. It's a good practice to, when you're reviewing code, look at the code and say, okay, am I, as the reviewer, can I understand what it's doing? And will I be able to understand what it's doing, like, in a month or 2 months from now? Is it clear enough to me what's happening in this code? Some things that teams often forget in doing code review: make sure that you're offering positive feedback. I know I've been a part of teams before where it's really about, this needs to change, let's change this, let's change this. But, it's really an act of vulnerability to submit a pull request. I know that every time I submit a pull request, I am hopeful, right, that these changes are going to be merged and I won't have to make too many changes, right? I'm trying my best to do my very best job, and I'm hopeful that it'll be a good experience. So please acknowledge the work that the people put into it. It's really important to find positive things to say about a pull request. This is so great. Default to approval. And what I mean by that, let's say someone has a pull request and they accidentally left in a console.log or left in something that that they didn't want to have as a part of that pull request. Approve the PR, and really that's the only thing, right? Approve the PR, say, yep, this looks great. Let's just get rid of that console.log. But approving, like defaulting to approval rather than requesting a change, having them make the change, and then having to request your review again. Number one, it's going to speed up the life cycle of the code review, right? And I think a lot of us forget, like, code review can take a really long time, and it should take time. We should do quality code reviews, but we can speed up some of the life cycle of the code review by defaulting to approval. But not only does it speed up that life cycle, it also builds trust in your team. So if I trust my developers to make a change that I request, I know that they're going to make that change. So just approve it and then allow them to make the change. Then they know that you trust them and they trust you, right? So building that trust on your team is really important. Again, be really kind and empathetic. If you think that something could be done in a different way, offer that way. Or if you have knowledge, maybe that they don't have, offer that knowledge, just in a kind and empathetic way. What else do I want to say about this? Oh, I'm going to talk about helping others understand your changes, doing a self-review in a minute. Again, try to answer any questions that somebody might have. Make sure you're answering those questions. And again, it's really important. Code review is an important task. So take your time, go through the code, really understand how it's working, and ask questions. Run the code. This to me is straightforward. I'm not going to take time on this slide. So this is really important. I think one of the best things to have code review go really, really smoothly, and to have it go, have those cycles go a little bit faster, is to help others review your code. So number one, make sure that you have a really great PR description. I can't tell you what a difference it is to go to your 2 pull request descriptions this week were just fantastic. I knew exactly what I needed to do to run the code. I knew what the acceptance criteria were. I knew everything that I needed to know right there in GitHub. I didn't have to go look on a different screen to find the information. Those meaningful PR descriptions make a huge difference for your reviewers. If possible, write meaningful commit messages, and I'll show you an example of that in a sec. And self-reviewing your code really is such a great thing to do. So after I do this for almost every pull request that I do, after I submit a pull request, I'll go through my own code and I'll make comments. Like maybe I had to do something a little bit goofy in CSS. We were having a CSS issue with IE11 or something. I will go in and say, hey, I got this from this certain website. This manages this particular issue in a really great way, and this is why I did it this way. Or, but I won't go through line by line, but in anything that might look a little bit that might need some extra explanation, I'll give that explanation ahead of time and not make my reviewers ask those questions of me. So I'll do a self-review of my code. And then sometimes I'll have a solution to something and I don't love my solution. I'll ask a question, right? I'll put up my PR and say, okay, I tried this. I feel like there's probably a better way to do this. Can you think of a way that we could do this a little bit better? So ask questions on your own PR. Don't be afraid to do that. There's some really great screen capturing tools for putting information into your pull request. So Loom is a really great screen recording website that allows you to just do a demo of what you've done. Skitch, I haven't used, but I think it's the same thing. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Zappy, I don't work for Zapier, but I use Zappy all of the time. It's a really great tool for doing screenshots. You can do screen recordings. You can annotate everything, and you can even do animated GIFs. It's really useful for doing pull requests. Has anyone used Skitch? Anyone? I think it's like Loom. All right, so self-reviewing code, one of my favorite things about code review. All right, so let's pop over to GitHub and explore just kind of the things that you can do in GitHub to do code review. So first I'm gonna pop over to Brittany and Rachel's second pull request. So some of the neat things that you can do in GitHub specifically, when I review code, I'm going to look at their PR description, and then if I have any questions, I'll ask those questions right away, just in the comment at the bottom, not necessarily in line, but maybe I'm not sure where in the application this functionality is located, and maybe they could flesh out their PR description a little bit. But then when I'm ready to look at the actual code, I'll go over to the Files Changed tab. And you can do a number of things in GitHub itself. So let's walk through. Okay, so let's say I'm at this line of this file, right? I can click on this little plus sign if I have a comment about that particular line. I can say, all right, this looks really good. I'm glad you checked blah, 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 right? You can write those comments right in line so they know exactly what you're referring to when you're doing that code review. And then I'm gonna pop over to, yes, I do want to discard those changes. Okay, so because that PR has already been merged, I can't do that. But in this PR, you can suggest changes right in line. So let's say I want to suggest a change for this specific line of code. I'll just hit the plus sign. And then there's this little button over here that says insert a suggestion. So when I click on that, doop, that code will show up right in the code and right in the editor here, the markdown editor. And then I can say, oh, I want you to do this. I think this would be a good idea. And then add that comment, right? And then that developer can just commit that suggestion right in line here rather than going back to their IDE. It just makes it a little bit faster. So you can make suggestions right here in GitHub. And I want to get rid of that. Delete. Yes. So that's just a little handy feature in GitHub that you might not know about. You can make suggestions that they can commit right in line. What else? Oh, I don't know how your GitHub is set up personally, but I have my file set up so that I can see the changes side by side. And you can do that by going to this little cog right here. Theoretically. There we go. So you can see things in a unified view and then apply, and then it'll reload. So I can see like all of the changes in one file. I prefer to see it side by side. It helps me to review the code a little bit better. So I like to split the view, and then hiding white space changes. Just if somebody inadvertently adds like an extra line space or something in between code lines, and it's really not an important thing to review, that just hides those white space changes. That's what that does. Another thing that you can do in GitHub is to review code and go like commit by commit. So the way to do that, there are a couple different ways, but probably the easiest way is right here again in the files changed tab. I'm looking at these changes from all commits dropdown. There we go. And then I can say, okay, I'm going to start at this first commit that they did, and then I can sort of see their path, like how did they arrive at their final solution. And I especially will review by commits. Let's say somebody's put up a pull request, and maybe I've requested some changes, and then they have a commit that has those changes in it. I'll go look at that specific commit just so I can just revisit the changes that they added, and makes it so I don't have to go back and look at, like, I'm not confused by everything else around it. I can just isolate that one change. But here I'm going to look at the first commit. Ta-da, that's the first commit. I can see that they commented that out and then they moved it someplace else. Looks good. And then I can click this next button over here, and then it'll go to the next commit, and I can just cycle through those. So that's kind of a neat way to look at somebody's code review. Let's see. And then one other thing I like to do, let's say I have a pull request that maybe has like 10 files that I need to look at. I will, as I get through a file and I feel like, okay, I've looked at this file and this looks great to me, or I've reviewed everything in that file that I need to review, I'll click this viewed button. And then it just gets it out of my sight and I don't have to worry about it. It just declutters it a little bit for me. So let's see. And I think you've all had the experience of doing the approval, but just again, you can add comments in line. And when I'm adding comments, I can, add a comment. And instead of just saying add a single comment, I can start a review, and then it will batch all of my comments together. And then when I get done, I'm going to do that. Then I can go back to review changes and submit my review, either approve or request changes, etc. But defaulting to approval. Cool. What questions do you have about that?
So there was point 2 on one of your slides, number 2. You're talking about when we're testing stuff, right? Is that kind of essentially the same as the deploy feature that Netlify is giving us, where we can just kind of hit deploy and then test out the site?
Correct. So
Okay.
you can use that. You can use that feature branch, I'll call it. Like you can use that feature branch that Netlify creates for us to test out the code. You can also pull it down to your machine, pull that developer's branch down to your machine and run it locally, of course, too. But it is handy to have that feature branch right there so you don't have to go through that extra step.
And the other thing I think, so I know that Brittany and Rachel had done some pretty significant work on the custom hook that they made. So I guess is it kind of like a gut feeling to kind of know when to ask for another pull request? Like I think I had messaged you. I'm like, hey, Lauren, I did some really minor styling changes here. I just want to let you know that I did it. I don't know if it's like if I need to submit another pull request for it. So I guess like how much, where is that line kind of where we're like, oh, we should probably submit another pull request before.
Sure. I would say in general, like we'll just follow the code review lifecycle, right? Submit the PR, ask for feedback, get some feedback, make changes, and kind of live in that center loop until it gets approval. And so that applies, I think, to what you were asking about your own code, right? Yours and Dee's branch. For Rachel and for Brittany, like what they were doing had already met the acceptance criteria. And I think in this case, we wanted to just kind of get that merged and then allow for that freedom to maybe refactor and make it even better. Do you know what I mean? So in general, for that one, I just didn't want them to get, stuck and have to roll back and roll back. Like it was already, like it was ready to go. Let's merge it in. That freed you and D up too, right? To have their code just in case there were going to be any merge conflicts. I think this is the first team that ever didn't have merge conflicts for the very first week. So it was really impressive, to be honest. It was really good. I think that's why we made that call. But in general, we sort of live in that code review cycle where you're getting feedback and making changes and getting feedback and making changes. I like for sometimes if I'm working on maybe a bigger feature and it's getting to be more code than I want in my pull request, like it's just getting to be too much to want to continue on that one branch, I'll branch off of my branch and then like say that there's a little part of it that I want to refactor, but I don't, and I just want to experiment with it in a different branch. I'll branch off of my own branch and kind of experiment in something else. And then when I feel good about it, I'll merge it back into my branch. So that's another way to.
Also, one thing, sometimes it can be really tough on reviewers if there's a really, really large PR. And sometimes it's really nice if you can figure out how to break it up into a bunch of smaller PRs, and it'll increase the quality of the PR, and all, you know, people who are reviewing your code are going to be much happier.
Yeah. It's hard to review a ton of code that you don't necessarily, the people who are doing the reviewing don't have the same context that you do, right? Because you've really been immersed in that feature, immersed in that problem, and they're less connected and less knowledgeable about it. So anything that you can do to make your reviewers' lives easier, they're going to be really happy. So smaller PRs are definitely better, and you know, giving those really great pull request descriptions, those helpful pull request descriptions, give them what they need, and then that cycle just go so much faster, and the review that they can give will be so much better, and the code in the long run then will be better.
And you were talking about self-reviewing and making comments. Is that something that you're doing like inline comments or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So for example, if I went into yours, I'd be like, right, I would just do it right. Exactly. I would do it right in line. This is why I decided to do such and such. And especially important, I think. It just helps gives reviewers context about what you were thinking, why you did something a certain way, especially if it doesn't seem obvious that that's the way that it should be done. You can say, okay, I tried this and I tried this and I tried this, and this is the way that I thought was best because, right? Just to give them the heads up that you thought about all of these things. Cool. So, I mean, we talked a little bit at the beginning about what the experience was like, what your experience was like before, and then I just for a couple of minutes, because we want to get to talking about issues, but any thoughts about what code review has been like this past week with Collab Lab?
I was super grateful that it was a really safe space, and just like you're saying, you know, it was positive, it was encouraging. We got both things that we had done well, in addition to things that could be improved, and those were given in a really very helpful and respectful way. And it didn't feel, like, I think sometimes people talk about it can feel personal, but it's not personal. It's like you said at the beginning, it's a conversation about a set of changes, and the way that everybody commented really made it feel that way. So that was great.
Good. Nice. I thought everyone did a really nice job. And then now that you maybe know some more tips and tricks about how to code review, like how to click and where to click and things to look for. Just everyone, let's all keep that in mind as we go forward, that we're right, that it's this conversation, and ask questions. If you don't know how something works, like that's a great way to get started with code review, is to just ask them to explain something, like maybe you don't understand it, and that's a great way to get started doing code review.
Yeah, I kind of had a question about that. Should we, if we're not understanding necessarily what's going on, should we reach out and, should we ask that inside the pull, like as a comment, or should we kind of reach out to the person separately from the pull request?
Oh, I would absolutely just ask right in the pull request, because it brings that knowledge to everyone, and it asks the question for everyone. And you may think that you're the only person with that question, but chances are, if you have that question, there might be others. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions if you're not understanding how something works, because you'll probably be doing somebody else a favor by asking the question. And then, and it's going to give the developers the opportunity to share, like to teach, right? To share that information. And that is a really great skill for all of us to practice that technical communication. So yeah, I ask questions in code review all the time. Like I'll say, I think I understand that this is what this is doing. Is that what this is doing? Just want to verify my understanding. Don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, did you want to say something?
Another great thing about asking those kind of clarification questions on PRs is you might think that the only thing you're communicating is, hey, I lack knowledge and I don't know something, can you fill me in? But that's not true. You're also communicating, this code was unclear such that someone else had to ask a question about it. So I love when people ask clarification questions, because that is like a signal to me that I need to either like rename a variable or maybe slightly restructure the code to be clearer, or add some comments to make it obvious what's happening. So even just like blundering in and not knowing anything and being like, hey, can you explain how this works? Like that's constructive. That's great. So.
Then also I'd add that a lot of the times when I go into a PR, I'm reading through everyone else's comments. Sometimes I do it first, sometimes I do it later. And so having that kind of a conversation out there is really great. And sometimes you can end up having a conversation that'll have 4 or 5 developers chiming in about things. So it's a really great spot for team collaboration.
Yep, and it's great for history. Like I can't tell you how many times I go back and look at previous PRs that have already been merged just to learn how something was done or to remind myself why a certain change was added. Like PRs are a great way to, I'm not coming up with the right words, but like a great way to document what's been done in the code base. And you can always go back and look and see why and what questions were answered. Really valuable. Cool. All right, I'm going to go pass it off to Chris to go through the issues for the week, just so we keep moving.
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so there are 2 issues we're going to go over. The first one is issue 3, which is, as a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so I can start tracking purchased items. So this is basically just the ticket to create a new shopping list for a user. Whenever you do that, what you'll do is you'll generate a new unique token for that user. You'll persist their token to their local storage. And then once that token is present, you'll show the user the list view, which, since they just created the list, will be empty. For your reference, there is already a helper function that's located in source_lib_tokens.js that you can call in order to generate that token. And I've got that code up right here for you. It's pretty simple. There's just a get token function. That's the default export here. And you can just call that to get back a string, I think. I think it's a string, yeah. And you'll use that and save it to local storage. So the acceptance criteria here are, for users who don't already have a token persisted to their local storage, you should create a button or a link that exists on the home screen that allows them to create a new list. This was actually part of the reason why I asked if there should be a link to the home screen, because the home screen is like relevant here. When they click that button or link, it creates the new token and saves it to local storage. And then once the token has been created and saved, the user is redirected to the list view after it's created. And for users who already have a token saved in local storage, they should be shown / redirected to the list view. And I think the way that I would interpret that is that if they go to the home page, which only has a button to add a list, they should just get redirected directly to the list view. Does that make sense to the other mentors too?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great, so that's story 3. Are there any questions on this?
I have one. So you had mentioned I'm wondering if we can use something that we already put in there. So we have a list view and an add view.
Mm-hmm.
And I put in a welcome at one point. I can't remember why. So could that be used as like the home?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah. One thing that tripped me up on this ticket, and I had to kind of reread it and reread a couple other tickets to really understand this, is each user is only ever going to have one list. Just FYI. So once you've created the list, it will be persisted to your local storage, and then you can take that token and give it to someone else if you want them to have access to your list. And that would be like a good way for you to, for example, share the same list across your laptop and your mobile phone, for example, because then they have the same token and they edit the same list. But as far as I can tell from all of like the acceptance criteria and everything, you're only ever going to be editing a single list with the application.
So, sorry, I have a quick question then. So if you shared your token with someone else and they like started adding to that list, would that then be associated as their list as well?
Yep, you'd have the same list.
Okay.
Yeah.
But obviously the local storage, okay, yeah.
Right, and in this case, the only thing local storage is used for is just to store that token. And then whenever in other tickets, when you create items within the list, you'll use that token as the key to then save those items to Firestore.
Okay.
Which is a great segue into the next ticket, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about. But I'll just ask if there's any other questions here before we move on.
So I'm wondering, it sounds like, and I might be misunderstanding, it sounds like you can either have your own list or you can join a list, but can you do both?
You can. Yep. You'll be able to, eventually you'll be able to input, further down the line, there'll be an input box that you can input a token. So let's say you shared a token with me. I could have my own shopping list associated with this certain token. And then you could be like, hey, come to my shopping list, and you'll give me your token, and I'll enter that, and that'll take me to our new list, like our list, your list.
But I think at any given time, you'll only have one token in use, right?
Right. Yeah, I was wondering, because it seemed like the intention is what you're describing, Lauren, but then like technically in terms of how this is instructing us to go about, it seems like you wouldn't ever be able to have both your own list and a list that you're sharing with someone else. Like, it doesn't seem like it's architected to accept multiple tokens and manage multiple shopping lists. You could totally build that, but it didn't seem, at least to me, that the tickets were kind of like broken out that way.
Yeah, I think that you'd have to, I mean, we can talk about it later, but
I have a question.
yeah, go for it.
So if you have a token and then you share your token with someone and they had a token, they shared their token with you, do you lose your original token? I'm kind of confused. like
my understanding is that the correct thing to do is to override your current token if a new token is inserted.
So then you lose your list?
The way that it is currently architected.
Well, possibly the next ticket will help to elucidate a little bit, because it's about persisting the data, right?
Yeah, let's jump to that issue. So story 4 is actually adding the items to the shopping list. So we've got a quick description of the data structure here. It's going to have a name. It's going to have how soon are you likely to buy it again, with some options. And then the last date upon which it was purchased, which can be null initially if you haven't purchased it yet. Excuse me. So you're going to need to build a form in order to create these items, presumably with elements for each of the data points so that the user can enter it into the form. When you hit submit, the item is saved to the database associated with the user's token. This is another reason why I think you can only ever have a single token at one time. Otherwise, you would need a form element to indicate which token to associate this given item to. Or you would have to have some concept of multiple lists that you can edit, it's like somehow, which you could totally build. You could absolutely do that. But I think the AC are just meant to have one token at a time, I think. So then along with the item name, you want to have an integer value corresponding to the estimated number of days until the next purchase, which just correspond to these different items. So like the integers will be like 7, 14, and 30 here. Purchase date can be null initially, mentioned that already. And then the item names should just be displayed as a simple unordered list on the list view after they're added. So in the list view, it should show like toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, but you don't have to display the other data like how soon are you to buy it again or the last purchase date, for example, just the names. So what questions do y'all have on this one?
I'm wondering, does seeing how the token is used to persist the data help Dee for you to, or does that clarify anything about how you wouldn't necessarily really lose the data, right? Because it's persisted in Firestore.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, what you could do presumably is like build a list with a few items and then delete the token from your local storage, add your friend's token to your local storage, go edit that list, right? Delete your token again and add your old token back. And when you refresh, you'd see those old items because they're still in the database. And of course, deleting things from local storage manually is kind of hacky. So who knows, maybe a good enhancement would be to like have a button to like, you know, replace your token or something like that. So.
And that maybe, and sometimes I'll build enhancements like, even though it's not part of the acceptance criteria, because it makes development easier if I'm sitting there going deleting it all the time.
Right, yeah, totally. And if you wanted to go even further out, like you could just have like maybe a drop down that selects which of the current tokens that you want to be using within your current session and go like multi-token, multi-list. But that's all like way out of scope. This is just,
Yeah.
for now, just one token.
Yeah, so I want to remind everyone, really focus on like the acceptance criteria. Don't, there's enough here to worry about. So
don't listen to Mike and Chris. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to understand what we're not building to help us understand what we are building, and to realize that those things could exist later if we wanted to make them, but for now it's just this thing, right?
And it sounds like something that Lauren, you said earlier, made it sound like maybe we'll have like an input box and a submit or something like that where we can enter a token. And so that might be something to at least be thinking about right now.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually another ticket too. If you take a look in the future, I think that's
number
5, right? Yeah, adding in a token from someone else. So very soon. Okay, so with the descriptions of the tickets out of the way, I think now we should revisit which of the, like what grouping we have this week, because I think those are predetermined, and then we'll have each grouping pick which ticket they want to work on, right?
Yep.
So what are the groupings, Lauren? I don't know that off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure, let me look. So if we look in the project brief in GitHub, but this week is Viet and Brittany are working together, and Rachel and Dee are working together.
Cool.
So I'm really torn because I'll admit I was messing around last week before our first sync, and I've got a form mostly built, but also I haven't worked with tokens very much. So I would kind of love to get more experience with that. So I'm like on the fence here. So if anyone feels really strongly, then just putting that out there.
Yeah, I'll just chime in also. Just that, you know, I don't know why local storage. Chris had mentioned it, I think, during our office hours as well. Like I don't know much about local storage. I would like to learn more about that. So that's the direction that I'm leaning myself. I don't know how you feel about that, Brittany, since we're working together, but that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Yeah,
I don't know about UD, but that works for me if they want to take local storage, and we'll take the adding form.
Yeah, I'm actually more interested in the adding form. I've used local storage before, like to set a token, but the adding the form is like, my mind is not comprehending it right now, so I would like to have more time with it.
And
all right,
if it would be helpful, I'm happy to share some of the stuff I was just sort of working on with you, Rachel and Dee, if you'd like.
Yeah, and I also looked into both issues as well. There's just on the React website, there's like a little thing about forms there.
Yeah, I was reading that as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. And yeah, and then know that your groups are going to want to work closely together this week, because the forum people are going to need the token, right? So just as a heads up for the forum people, you're going to want to just create, like how they did this week, they just had that auto, like you just did that auto ID. You're just going to want to create a made up token in Firebase so that it's easier for you to work until the token people's work is done. Does that make sense? So just have a pretend token in Firestore that you can associate with the items that you're adding to that list. And then, but you be working closely together to figure out how to hook everything up together.
I think that's really like in my normal work, I have that happen all the time where you're like waiting on these, when's the API developer going to be done with this so that I can do this. So it's very much like our day jobs here.
So the pressure's on. For
Yeah. Come on.
It's the fun part.
Awesome.
Cool.
Something
All right. Oh, go ahead.
Something that could help you to coordinate too is if y'all can decide on the mechanism by which you want to retrieve that token. Like say, for example, we're going to create a hook for it. Then the people who are building the form can know, okay, well, this is going to come in through a hook. So I can start by maybe using like the use state hook to start, and then later I can swap that out with another hook or something like that. Just an idea.
Cool. I will post the threads for the week's work in our channel right here after the meeting. And then I'm hosting office hours this week. So I'll put up another thread and ask for votes for days and times and all that good stuff. Woohoo. Great work, everyone.
Yeah.
Nice
really
job,
y'all. Set yourselves up for success, and everything looks great so far. And so I'm super excited. This this week's issues are fun and challenging. Like I think the forum is really pretty challenging. So you've got your work cut out for you, but please reach out for help, reach out to each other, right? You have a lot of good resources right here on your team. So I'm looking forward to working with you all this week.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Good luck, everybody.
Take care.
See ya.
Good luck.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.